guys, and welcome to another episode of Fabric Fridays with me, Mary Morningstar Johnson from Ruby and Violet Designs. The first thing that I want to do today is I want to talk to you about my earrings that I'm wearing today. And these earrings are gorgeously beaded by a girl that I follow on Instagram at Little Poet Adoption, and I'll drop her Instagram handle below. She has a really unique story. A friend of mine is friends with her, and her husband are trying to adopt. And she makes these beautiful earrings, and all the money that she makes from it her and her husband are using to try to adopt. So if you guys are looking for Christmas presents, gifts of any kind, you might keep her in mind. It does go for a good cause, and I know that she would really appreciate your business. So I just wanted to start out with that. So in today's episode, I want to talk to you guys about your scraps. So back in August, a lady in my quilt club, my friend Mary Lou, who is one of the main reasons I even started quilting, she taught me all of the basics and still teaches me a lot of things today. But anyway, she did a program for the quilt club I belong to, and she talked about some different quilters and how they go about organizing their scraps, using their scraps. And I keep all of my scraps because I am a believer that we spend a lot of money on fabric, and it's a shame to just, throw away a perfectly good 1-inch strip, 2.5-inch strip. I would be sick if I threw something like that away. And so I keep all of my scraps, and I have a lot of scraps, and in hopes that I will use them. And I think that that is going to be one of my goals going into 2021, is to really get a handle on my scraps, get them organized. And I've gotten really inspired by Bonnie Hunter, Karen Brown, and Lori Holt. And so I'm going to talk to you guys today about them and how they have recommended some different blocks that you can try, and some different ways of keeping your scraps. And I'm just going to give you some information about that, and then I'm going to show you some blocks that I've done already, trying to get started on working on my scraps. So I want to first talk to you about Bonnie Hunter. Bonnie is an amazing quilter. She designs quilt patterns. She runs the Quiltville Inn, and someday I'm going to go there. Someday I would love to do a workshop with her, but I'm not sure how many workshops are going on with COVID. But anyway, she is amazing. Follow her on Instagram, check out quiltville.com, and definitely see what all she does and is working on. I don't know how she gets everything done that she does. She puts out quilts like there's no tomorrow, and she's pretty amazing. So definitely check her out. But one thing that she has said on her blog is she who dies with the most fabric wins, is what she thought in her 20s and 30s and 40s. And now going into her 50s, she realizes that the game has changed, and she who sews up all of her fabric before she dies wins, is now what she thinks. And so I can definitely see that. I love to have fabric, but sometimes I do start to think about, gosh, I'm really getting a lot of fabric, and I need to get a move on getting this fabric sewn up and taking care of my scraps. And so anyway, that's a goal again that I have going into 2021. And so one of the quilt blocks that Bonnie recommends, it's basically you take 2.5 inch by 1.5 inch strips of a background fabric. It could be, really, it could be anything, and it doesn't even really have to be a background fabric. If you want a more scrappy look to using your scraps, you definitely can. I like that contrast between the design of the fabric and like a background fabric, and I don't mind for the background fabric to have some sort of pattern to it, but I want it to stay a little bit more muted so that it brings my fabric that has a design to it to the forefront of the quilt. And so that's just my own personal aesthetic. You know, everybody has their own aesthetic, so go for what you love and what you want to do. And you can also make this into a quilt. You can use it on the back of a quilt. And so just, you know, it's one way to kind of keep your scraps organized. And so anyway, you take these 2.5 inch by 1.5 inch strips, and then you can use 1.5 by 1.5 or 1.5 inch square blocks, and you can make these really cute little blocks. And I got into some of my Christmas scraps with, you know, I know my daughter likes to tell me it's Thanksgiving or Turkey Day next. It's not Christmas yet, and but I've been slowly kind of gearing up towards Christmas, and so anyway, I grabbed my Christmas scraps. And you can kind of do these any way you want. You can put them this way. I did stick with, I have a lot of this red dotted Swiss, and so I use that in each of these blocks, and then I use the Christmas fabric in them. And I'm not really showing any fabrics in particular. I think these are all Joanne fabrics, cotton fabrics, and so I'm just kind of taking my fabrics, I'm trying to condense them down. And so I made my 1.5 inch squares, and then my background 1.5 by 2.5 inch rectangles. And so what's nice about this is that, as Lori Holt mentions, which I'll get into in a little bit, you can have little tubs or little baskets, and you can keep all of your squares. So if you make 2.5 inch squares or 1.5 inch squares, and you can keep each of those separate as you go, and that will just further help keep you organized. You can even keep 2.5 inch strips for your binding and just kind of keep a basket of that in case you're needing some quick binding that's already cut out. And so those are just some different ways to kind of help keep you organized, especially with it being at the end of the year and having all of your projects that you've done all year, just trying to kind of get organized and get condensed down going into the next year. So Karen Brown is the next quilter I want to talk to you about, and she has an excellent YouTube channel called Just Get It Done Quilts. And definitely check out her videos. She has some great ones on using up scraps. She calls it Mount Scrapmore, and that's really a perfect name for it, because when you gather up all of your scraps, it can start looking like Mount Scrapmore. So definitely check out her and her YouTube channel and listen to some of the great advice that she gives. And some of what I really liked that she had to say about using up scraps is that while it's good to have maybe your different bins with your different sizes of blocks, sometimes it's good to have a few different blocks in mind that you want to make with your scraps. Just whether it's, you know, Bonnie Hunter's scrap design or you know, whatever block it is that you're going to make, just have a few different ones in mind, because if you only have just one or two, you might get kind of tired of thinking about, oh, I just need to cut out a bunch of 1.5 inch squares, and that doesn't really sound fun to sew. It's not very inspiring. If you have some different fabrics and different sizes and different ideas in your head of what it is that you want to make, you might stay inspired and keep motivated to keeping your scraps cleaned up and organized. And after watching some of Karen Brown's YouTube videos, I took another project where I had a lot of half square triangles, and it was my Home Sweet Home block, and it was from when I was making the roofs of all of the bungalows and log cabin houses. Every time you cut off your scrap ends to then press it out to have your roof, I had half square triangles from that. And so I took all of those half square triangles and I just matched them with whatever I had. Some of them were, you know, white to the color, and some of them were to where I had the bungalow roof to the background. And so I just started sewing all of those up, and I got quite a stack. And you can really start thinking about what you want to do with these. And now I have these nice sized blocks. And so one thing that I did is I sewed up this pinwheel. And it was really neat because some of the blocks, some of the white blocks had these little pieces left over from the chimney on the Home Sweet Home, and it made this secondary little design within the pinwheel. And so now I have these great blocks, and I can either use them on the back of my Home Sweet Home quilt for the backing, or I can make a totally new quilt. And so again, just taking some of the things that you have and just sewing them up, sometimes that in and of itself can give you ideas of what you can do with your scraps and keep you again inspired. And I know sometimes working with the same fabric that you have already worked with quite a bit, it can be repetitive and you can get really tired of the fabric. I don't find myself getting tired of my fabric, but I usually when I pick a fabric, I pick something that I just really, really, really love. And so it takes a lot for me to get kind of sick of it. But if you are sick of it, just set it to the side and just pick it up when it feels maybe a little bit more new or a little more fresh to you. And so last but not least, I want to talk to you guys about Lori Holt from Be In My Bonnet. And you can also watch her on YouTube, and she has some great ideas for using up scraps. And just to give you guys a sneak peek of something that I'm working on for a future video, I'm not sure when that video will happen because this is going to be a little bit more of a time-consuming quilt. But I had bought her Sew by Row pattern, and I can't wait to get to work on this. A friend of mine showed it at my quilt club, and it was absolutely beautiful. And so I bought the pattern because I really, really want that quilt for myself. And so anyway, she again has some really great ideas of how to use scraps. I love her organization tips in her videos, how she has her squares and her strips organized, and she does specific sizes. And I think that that's important too, to think about how you work and typical sizes that you usually use in your quilts. And I think that that will make organizing your scraps easier too. If you use a lot of 2-inch squares, then make a lot of 2-inch squares. She had a great idea where she does a lot of 5-inch strips that cut down easily into a 2.5 by 5 strip, or even 2.5 squares. So just thinking about things like that will make your life easier, I think, in organizing your scraps. And so anyway, one of the scrap ideas that she has is Scrappy Crossroads quilt block, and I only got one of them done, but you actually make 4 of these and put them together like a diamond, and then you have these really neat 4 patches in the middle. And I used my scraps from my hooked project that I did, and that Mr. Domestic designed this fabric. And so anyway, I'm excited to kind of make some of those blocks too. So I feel like I have a really good start going with organizing my scraps, and as we get further into 2021, when I can get my scraps a little bit more under control, I will be sure to share with you guys and show you some pictures of what that looks like. So I hope that you guys enjoyed today's episode of Fabric Fridays with me, Mary Morningstar Johnson from Ruby and Violet Design, and also have a really great weekend too. Bye guys.